For the last few weeks, we've been looking at life lessons from the TV show Ted Lasso. And for those of you who haven't seen the television show, it's on Apple TV. If you haven't seen it, it's okay. What's been interesting about this show, though, is it is about a coach from the United States, a high school football coach. At least we think he's high school. But a football coach playing American football who gets hired to become the coach of a soccer club in England, knowing nothing at all, of course, about the difference between football and soccer and all of the language and all of the cultural differences between two countries. And this apparently inept coach who doesn't know enough about the sport is basically what the story is about. His name is Ted Lasso. It's played by Jason Sudeikis. And what's interesting about the show is it has won multiple Emmys, partly because it's all about heart. And so I'm not going to give a lot away about the show. If you haven't seen it, that's okay. Because what's true is this apparently inept but extremely likable coach offers us amazing life lessons. And as I was watching the show earlier in the spring, I'm like, oh, I could do a talk about that. Oh, I could do a talk about that. And that's how this series has happened. The first week, we looked at a lesson that is shown in season 1, actually, and it's called Be a Goldfish. And just a quick recap, because it is on YouTube, available on your app. There is, basically what happens is one of the professional football players, I mean, these are accomplished sports athletes, is trying to do something and it's just not working. And he gets really upset at himself, really down on himself. One of the not very nice team members kind of makes fun of him. One of the more senior team members is like, don't be so hard on the guy. He's hard enough on himself. And he walks off, this person who's upset at himself. And the coach calls him over and says, do you know who the happiest animal on the planet is? The guy's like, what? And he says, the goldfish. Because the goldfish has a 10-second memory. Go be a goldfish. And the whole idea of this is to not allow so much of our history, whether it's past history or whether it's immediate history 5 seconds ago, to cloud our ability in the present and affect our possibilities for the future. So the invitation in week 1 was to take the idea of what if you had no reference for the fact that you failed 15 times before and just got up and acted with no reference for all that self-talk that we can be so harmful for ourselves about. So that was week 1. Be a goldfish. Have a 10-second memory. Then week 2. There we go. Last week, we looked at the idea of not hitting the panic button and not hitting the snooze button. And the context for this was that the team is sort of doing okay. Not great, not terrible. They've been tying some games. And somebody comes up to Coach Lasso and says, when are you going to hit the panic button? The season's coming to an end. When are you going to hit the panic button? And he says to this character, two things I never like to hit: the panic button and the snooze button. And we looked last week at how these two are related in many ways, because sometimes we hit the snooze button on things that we probably would be wiser to act on in the moment. Because if we don't act on them, because we hit the snooze button, it may lead to a time of panic later. And so the message here was, don't hit the panic button. If you don't like to hit the panic button, then make sure that you don't hit the snooze button. Take some action. Little bits of action go a long way so that panic doesn't need to happen. And have very clear values about what success looks like. Because maybe it's not about winning. So that was last week's message. Today, if I can get it, there we go. Went too far. Totally went too far. Sorry, I got a mirror here, so I'm trying to see what the screen is doing. In case you're wondering what I'm up to. I could almost turn around, but then, yeah. That would make too much sense. Today, we're going to talk about another brilliant quote from Lasso, and that is, even Woody and Buzz got under each other's plastic. And of course, this is a reference to the Toy Story, the Disney movie Toy Story. And the context is that these two players that I actually referenced before, the one who was kind of mean to the player and the one who stood up for the player, these two players, as you can tell, they have some friction between them. One is a more seasoned player, he's actually older, and the other one is this young and upcoming, brilliant talent. But they're quite antagonistic with each other. And so Ted resolves to have them work their differences out, and so he seats them at the same table at an event, and then tries to do what, like he calls it, a parent trap. I'm parent trapping you, and I want you to tell each other one thing that you appreciate about each other. And just like it probably didn't work at home, in any of our homes, it didn't work there either. And so in the end, they kind of give up on that idea because the animosity is a little bit too strong for that. He says, though, and I quote, "You don't need to be best friends to be great teammates. Heck, even Woody and Buzz got under each other's plastic." So that's where the saying comes from. And what do we see? Well, we see that there are these two amazing talents, these two amazing people. And they have the capacity to individually do wonderful things, but together to lift the team up to an even higher, unimagined level of greatness. They are bonded because they love their team, they love the sport, but they're at odds with each other because they are so very different. As I mentioned, the one is older, more seasoned. The other is kind of cocky, a little obnoxious, a lot obnoxious. One of the things I will warn you about this TV show is If swearing offends you, don't watch it. It's awesome, but if that's something that you can't put aside, then just listen to me tell you. The thing is that we see this play out in our world too, don't we? In our everyday life, where we have people who get together, joined by the love of something that might be a family member that they both love, or working together at the same workplace, or coming to the same spiritual community, or any one of hundreds of places where we meet in community. And of course, we're going to have different people with different personalities. And sometimes we get under each other's plastic. My friend Martha Creek always says, when two or more are gathered, there will be bristling. You didn't expect me to say that. Yeah. Where two or more are gathered, there will be bristling. And what if we could be more equipped to accept the truth of that statement? Because what happens is, of course, that when people get under our skin, under our plastic, when people push our buttons, that we often say things that we don't mean, or we say things in a mean way, or we pretend that it's not bugging us until they do something that's just like the final straw, and it's a tiny little thing, and we blow. And it has nothing to do with that tiny little straw. It's the result of all of these other things building up that this poor person has no idea about. And then what happens is the relationship becomes affected. And then all of that connection that we long for is threatened. We end up writing people off from our lives. And sometimes that may be appropriate, and sometimes it's just that we've mismanaged ourselves. And when that happens, often they mismanage themselves, and this happens. We have this division and discord. And it doesn't help us to remain connected. We don't give ourselves a chance to work together to create something great. Metaphysically, just a quick word about metaphysical interpretation, is about the idea that characters and places and events that we see in the outside world are also happening within us. And so metaphysically, we can take a look at, this upstart new idea and this old idea, seasoned. And we can see them as voices in ourselves, colliding in ourselves when we have a new idea that's clamoring for attention, and an old idea that's like, no, I'm not ready to look at that yet. I don't want to play in that sandbox. The old idea which resists the new idea as too immature, as too radical. So notice that everything I say, I tend to speak about our physical relationships with people, but it's also true about some of the little characters that live very, very happily in our minds. And so whatever I say about what happens out here, recognize that it's also relevant for what's happening within you. Let's talk about what our goal is. What is the goal of two people who could be best friends, but who get under each other's plastic? First, I think the goal is connection. The idea of mutually appreciating the skills and viewpoints of other people. Second, I think that there's an element of being open to embracing change. That what's happening with these two is you've got the old, you've got the new, and neither quite know how to integrate and how to connect. And so I think out of all of these possible scenarios, it's really the idea of embracing change that we can learn from with this lesson. Because when we embrace change, then the integration happens naturally. This is what Lasso says about change, and I quote, "Most of the time, change is a good thing, and I think that's what it's all about. Embracing change, being brave, doing whatever you have to so everyone in your life can move forward. Doing whatever you have to so that everyone in your life can move forward with theirs." Let me say that again because I think I messed it up the first time. Most of the time, change is a good thing, and I think that's what it's all about. Embracing change, being brave, doing whatever you have to so everyone in your life can move forward with theirs. That goes back a little bit to what we spoke about a few weeks ago, staying in your own lane, letting everybody stay in theirs and move forward with their journey. So the idea of embracing change kind of became awake for me as I was writing this talk. And then what came to mind for me was Jesus' parable about change, which is 27 words long-ish, found in the book of Mark. And it says, "No one sews a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old garment. If he does, the patch tears away from it, the new from the old, and a worse tear is made." No one sews a patch of unshrunk cloth onto an old garment. Because if they do, when that patch shrinks, a greater tear is made. How do we learn from Lasso and from Jesus in this case? Well, the first thing that we want to recognize when we are in any new situation, whether it's going with friends for a weekend that you think you're going to have an absolutely fantastic time, and then, oh my gosh, you get under each other's plastic. Or you're in a new workplace and you're noticing that people are kind of resenting you and not welcoming you in the way that you might like. Or you walk into a spiritual community and you see everybody's hugging and nice to each other and you're feeling ignored. Any place where there is a change, whether you're the old guy, the big cloth, the old cloak, or whether you are the patch, the new coming in, the first thing that we want to know and realize is that we want to expect tension. It is a normal, predictable response to change. Expect tension. There will be bristling. Don't expect not to have that, because that's setting yourself up for disappointment. When I first envisioned this talk, I certainly hadn't thought about this parable. And the more I think about the parable, I realize how relevant it is, which is obviously the beauty of the parable, is that you can find moments of magical truth where you don't expect them. So, as the person who is in a new situation, if you are the old, expect to feel tension, expect to feel resistant. You may feel threatened because other people are coming with new ideas and different approaches. Expect to wonder about what impact they're going to have. Expect to feel irritated. Expect to feel protective. And then, as the person who is the patch, the person who is the new, expect tension, expect pushback. Expect that others are going to keep visiting the people they know, and expect to be treated as the outsider. Don't take it personally. It's part of a normal, predictable cycle of behavior. So that's one. Next, stretch. Notice what Lasso does. What Lasso does next, after this doesn't work, is he goes to the old guy, the guy who's the seasoned performer, and he says to him, "What was it like when you were young?" And this is called the gift of the turnaround in my mind. And so what you want to do is, if you are the person who is the comfortable one, and you've got this young whippersnapper with a new idea coming up for you, do what Lasso did. Go to the most mature aspect of yourself first. And then ask yourself these questions. When you find yourself feeling irritated by this youthful energy that is so brilliant, what was I like when I was that? Did I say things that sounded selfish and self-absorbed? Did I behave like that when I was less mature? Be generous. Be bigger. Take the high road, be willing to stretch. And realize also that we never see the whole story about the newcomer, the new idea, the new person. As Lasso says in a different context, and I quote, "Not everybody had a good dad. Not everybody had a good dad. We don't know where people are coming from. We're like that iceberg. We see this much and there's this much beneath, and we don't know what's supporting the behavior that we're seeing. So be generous. And remember, and this is my wording, where there's drama, there's likely trauma. Where there's drama, there's likely trauma. And then be willing to be generous. Give them some space. And when you find yourself irritated, be less surprised. More, oh, that's interesting, and less, oh, they're a jerk. Woo. And I don't know whose phone just did that, but the universe is agreeing with me. So that's what, if you're the old, stretch. If you're the new, arrive mature. Pre-shrink a little bit. Don't come on too strong. Expect the tension. That means don't try to prove too much too quickly. Let your goodness and your greatness evolve and show itself in a normal, unforced way. Another excellent quote, and this is given by Lasso to this great new talent. And he says, and I quote, "I think that you may be so sure that you're 1 in a million that sometimes you forget that out there you're just 1 of 11. That you're just 1 of 11. He goes on to say, if you just figure out some way to turn that me into us, the sky's the limit for you. Isn't that clever? We all think that we're 1 in a million. We're actually 1 in 7 point something or 8 billion. But in our families, we're 1 of 2 or 3 or 10. In our workplaces, we're 1 of 20 or 30 or 100, whatever the number might be. So let's give everybody voice. We're not the only ones on the field. As Lasso's last line in the entire series is, it's not about me, it never was. And then have the strength to be accountable. If you're the new person and you've acted like a jerk and you've arrived immature, then it does take strength to admit that your initial approach wasn't productive. To swallow our pride, to ask for a new start. Our goal in all of it is connection. The way we get there is emotional safety. It means stretching if you're the old. It means being willing to not be so insistent when we're the new. To be honest about our behavior and forgive ourselves when we realize that we've messed up either way, because we've been closed to the new person, or we've been the new person and we've been too insistent that our way is the right way and the old way is all wrong. Another quote, and there's so many. I hope that either all of us or none of us are judged by the actions of our weakest moments, but rather the strength we show when and if we're given a second chance. the strength we show when we're given a second chance. And I would add to that the strength we show when someone asks for a second chance. Let us respond with grace and with kindness. And so, where two or more are gathered, there will be bristling. What's true is we don't need to write it off. Buzzy, what's his name? Woody and Buzz, I'm saying it wrong. Woody and Buzz
Lightyear
ended up becoming friends, but that's not how they started. Allow for the possibility of greatness. When something or someone is getting under your plastic, stretch. And handle with care. Handle with care. I bless you.